So, welcome everyone to today's webinar on navigating the rapid transformations within the life sciences industry. And as we approach 2025, it's essential to stay informed about key regulatory updates and technological advancements to ensure your organization's compliance. In this session, you will learn about critical regulatory trends that regulators are focusing on and how these developments will impact your operations. You'll gain valuable insights from this year's audit challenges, identifying common compliance mistakes, and proactive measures to avoid potential pitfalls in the coming year. Additionally, we will explore how emerging technologies, particularly innovations like AI, are set to revolutionize the life science sector. So we are thrilled to welcome three experts speakers today. Martin King will share his extensive knowledge gained from tracking over 3,000 regulatory updates, highlighting what you need to prepare for in the EU and UK. James Giannozos will present his top 5 updates from the FDA, focusing on advancements in AI and cybersecurity and their implications for your compliance strategies. Finally, Sumatha Kondabolu will dissect upcoming trends and regulatory hurdles, equipping you with the tools to anticipate and navigate future challenges. And as a reminder, we will be distributing certificates of attendance to attendees who stay until the end of the session. So please stick with us, and we will send those certificates within a couple of days, probably already tomorrow. So keep an eye on your inbox. And now I'm pleased to introduce Alex Pavlovich from Qualio, our event partner, as our co-moderator for this event. Alex will introduce our speakers and lead the Q&A session following their presentations.
Thank you very much, Jan, for that very nice introduction. And hello, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're dialing in from in the world. So, as Jan said, my name's Alex, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. That means it's my job to keep our expert speakers on schedule today as much as I can, and to receive any questions that you might have throughout the session and then pass it along to them. So please use the Q&A box on your screen to send in any questions that you might have. So we do have some dedicated Q&A time at the end of today's session. But if you do have a burning question or you want to dive deeper, perhaps into something on a particular slide that's been presented, please just add your question at the bottom and I'll pass it along to our speaker at a suitable moment during the presentation itself. I'll just find a good time to interrupt them and pass your question along. So don't feel you have to wait to the end. We want today to be an interactive experience that's as rewarding and insightful as possible for all of you guys, so don't hesitate to reach out. So I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Martin King, first of all, is an independent QA and RA consultant based in Switzerland. He brings a lot of experience from throughout the pharma and med device value chains. He's executed successful regulatory submissions on 6 of the 7 continents, and he specializes in supporting his diverse client base with targeted quality and regulatory expertise that helps to unlock markets, insulate against risk, and maximize future readiness, which is what today's session is all about. James is a seasoned quality professional with deep experience of medical device, pharmaceutical, and biologics spaces. He's got extensive experience of establishing QMS systems in accordance with FDA, ISO, CGMP, Health Canada standards, you name it. And in 2017, he founded RIMSYS, which is a world-leading regulatory information management software platform for medtech companies. And then last but certainly not least, Samartha is a senior quality business partner and one of my colleagues here at Qualio. And it's her job to support our regulated life science customers with targeted support to help them optimize their quality systems and build lasting compliance. She's got over 20 years of QA/RA experience. She even holds a master's in chemistry and an advanced certificate in quality assurance management, along with auditor certifications for ISO 13485, 17025, and 9001. So all that being said, we've got a really strong panel of experts to talk to you today and share their knowledge. Here's what we're going to be looking at over the next hour or so, hour and 8 minutes. Each of these speakers is tackling their area of expertise. So Martin, based in Switzerland, will be kicking things off for us by covering what's coming in 2025 in the EU and in the UK, which is where I'm currently based. We'll then head across the Atlantic to hear James cover the US side of things. And then Samartha will provide a more general overview of the quality landscape. So where companies have been struggling with compliance in 2024, key trends from this year, and what we can take from those to perhaps predict and extrapolate and expect from next year. So I'm one of the marketing managers at Qualio. We're a leading provider of EQMS software for life science companies. Just hit 700 customers, which we're very excited about. So if you need an EQMS in 2025 that's voted the easiest to use and scales with you and helps you embed best-in-class quality, then we'd love to chat with you. And special shout out to Jan and the team at Qualistry as well, who specialize in GXP webinars like this one and partnered with us to help bring you this session today. So we couldn't have done it without Jan and the Qualistry team. So a big thank you to those guys. So with all that being said, let's kick off the webinar and move into the content. I'd like to start by handing you over to Martin, who will be walking you through what's coming in the EU and the UK in 2025. So Martin, please come onto the virtual stage and fire away, please.
Am I here?
Yes, you're here, loud and clear. Martin, over to you, sir.
Yes, great. Thank you very much for the great introduction. And thank you, Qualio and Qualistry, for setting this up. It's always a pleasure. So, yes, like was said, I'll be looking at the EU and the UK. So you can see my slides are pretty simplistic, so it means I have to talk a lot. And I don't have much time, so there's going to be a lot of information in a very short time. What do I normally do when I'm not doing this sort of thing and tracking regulatory and quality news around the world? Yes, I usually help companies get their submissions successfully through conformity assessment and onto the market. Mostly medical device and combination product, but I do other things as well. So if we're going to look at medical devices in Europe and the EU, what has been going on, or what is going on? Well, what we can say is the only constant is change. And that is that the regulatory landscape for medical devices is still undergoing significant changes. Although I would argue that MDR and IVDR are reaching a stage of maturity. And I'll come on to why I think that is the case. But what is the goal of this? There are two requirements. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. There's two requirements for every regulatory submission. It's to ensure that whatever you're selling, whatever the product is, works. It does what you claim it does. And to ensure that it's safe. And those are the two elements that we're looking for anywhere. But what we see is a general movement of harmonization around the globe, and particularly in Europe and the UK, where we start to talk about the term reliance, and we're trying to streamline market access. We're trying to make it easier to get products into the market. And I'm going to try and give a really brief overview of how that can take place. So there's been a lot of news about MDR and IVDR most recently, as recent as October, or towards the end of October. There was a new resolution in the Parliament adopted to say, well, MDR and IVDR are not fit for purpose. They're not working as was intended. I mean, this has been a continuous, we could say, whine, but there is a serious situation where some products are going to be short on the market. And this resolution it acknowledges there are problems in implementing MDR and IVDR, and there are delays. But what we shouldn't expect in 2025 is new transition periods. But we could expect some flexibility where there's a genuine threat to device shortage. So where you're going to actually lose products on the market just because of this regulatory transition. I would expect to see some flexibility there. And we're going to see initiatives on reliance. They're already coming. So whether we will go so far to say that a device is approved under FDA in the US will be waved through in Europe, no, I don't think that will happen. But we will see that will help a submission in Europe and the UK. We will see this reliance building throughout 2025, but we're not there to an immediate adoption of someone else's conformity assessment as being applicable for another region of the world. So OIDAMED is also an odyssey. It will be continually, gradually implemented, and it's expected to be fully functional by the end of 2026. I think we can expect that to really happen. So we still have 2 years to go. And perhaps the good news is devices do not have to be registered on the database until they're approved. But if you have a device is approved, yeah, why not put them there? You get ahead of the curve. And certainly get your company registered and become what they call an actor on the system. And we should be aware that there are systems in Switzerland, SwissDAMED, and in the UK, similar systems coming where it will be required to register and keep updated what's going on with your devices. Where are we with notified bodies? And in the UK, we call them approved bodies. Well, there are 9 in the UK. And in Europe, we have 50 MDR notified bodies. So yes, we're getting there. We have resources on the market to do conformity assessment and 13 IVDR notified bodies. But be aware, you need to check the scope of the notified body that it meets your product. We still see companies out there who are not, they've got the wrong notified body because the notified body doesn't have the scope in their certification to approve the products. So just be aware of that. But yes, we are now caught up with things. And then we have the other big move was in October, we got the reference laboratories going for IVD. There are 5 EU reference laboratories for Class D products. What does that mean? It means that if you have a high-risk IVD product, you have to release each batch by having the batches tested by a reference laboratory. Or you have some arrangement with the notified body that says it's not every batch, but you're going to have to be regulatory monitored anyway. So what's really happened this week is that we've seen the EMA has released guidance for notified bodies to consult, that they can consult them concerning companion diagnostic products. So diagnostic products that lead to a specific therapy or a specific drug, and drug device combinations. So this is an indication that we're getting to a level of maturity with medical devices, with MDR and IVDR, because the EMA is becoming more active. And we're going to see this continue. So what's happening in the UK? Well, the MHRA is completely focused on renewing their and overhauling their regulations, and there's a consultation out there for the pre-market preparation. There's actually in Parliament a regulation being put in place for post-market surveillance. They're looking at introducing new requirements for device traceability, UDIs, that kind of thing. And there's some kind of consideration of the perhaps modifying the UK conformity assessment, but that's not really clear yet. And there's a move towards reclassifying IVDs towards ABCD type classifications. So more towards IMDF and the international arena. And definitely the UK is at the front of reliance. So they're at the front of acknowledging other people's conformity assessment. So yes, all this is good news. So what's happening in the pharmaceutical space? Well, we have the clinical trial information system becoming mandatory at the end of January, and you have to, if you have a long ongoing clinical trial, although it's been mandatory to put clinical trials on the information system since I think 2023, the move towards mandatory old clinical trials that were already running before then, they have to be on the CTIS by the end of January next year. And perhaps the other big thing going on that we see is the whole IRIS system. So the whole information, what's it called? Information regulatory information system. Anyway, this is what you use for your regulatory submission. And actually, they've got this great scientific research tool called Scientific Explorer, which uses an AI search engine to match all of the information. Integrated regulatory information system. That's it. That's what I was looking for. So that will be really. This is a really good move in the whole space, and the intention is to expand this to cover periodic safety update reports, post authorization measures, all of these obligatory reporting systems we can say are going digital, which is a great step forward. The EMA is playing a much more active role, as I've already said, with the whole, what happens when it's a combination product, how does a notified body get advice, and what are the official procedures that one should follow for combination products or companion diagnostics or implantable active devices. So this is really maturing, and today, or there's a regulation passed in Parliament yesterday which covers the ability for pharmaceutical companies to consult Health Technology Assessment Commission adopts rules for joint scientific consultations on medicinal products for human use. So they allowed this consultation procedure at least for the centralized process, which is a good step forward. It means we're getting the dialogue, and it will help streamline the process so companies can get guidance early on and not wait until much further down the road when they realize, oh, we need to get more data or we need to get more information to get our product approved for the market. So the other big elephant in the room, I suppose, is the Windsor framework. You've probably heard about this Windsor framework. Well, what happened was we had Brexit, and the whole UK left the EU, and they forgot there was this place called Northern Ireland, which just happens to be attached to the EU through Southern Ireland. And the situation there was, well, how can we regulate the movement of products? So basically, devices and pharmaceuticals, they have to be registered with the MHRA in the UK. That's the regulatory body in the UK. And you have to have a UK rep, just like you have an EU rep if you're a foreign company. But as of the 1st of January, you will need a specific registration with MHRA. Pharmaceuticals will need to be listed, and the products will need to be marked UK only. So these are all, and the UK only marking on the packaging also applies when you have a UKCA mark. So that's an important labeling consideration when you're when you're thinking about doing business in the UK and Northern Ireland. So basically, the Windsor Framework deals with a system of checks and balances to make sure that goods for the UK stay inside the UK and don't find their way back to Europe or through the back door. So that's the intention there. What's the other big thing in the UK? They're probably one of the most forward countries from the point of view of reliance, from the point of view of recognizing that something approved in the US may well be very good may well be acceptable almost as it is for the UK. Reliance is also happening at the EMA and at the MHRA level. So there's a mutual recognition of activities, and it's now reached to a point where GMP audits are acknowledged for, at least for pharmaceutical facilities in the US and in the EU and in the UK. So there's this movement of reliance. The world is getting smaller, and we're all complying with each other. Did I miss anything? I think I covered everything there, yeah?
Thank you, Martin. That's great.
Pleasure.
Rundown of the EU and UK. So now we've covered that, it's time to head across stateside. I'd now like to hand over to James, who will be covering important quality and regulatory updates from an FDA and US perspective. So, James, when you're ready, over to you, please.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks, everybody. My name's James Younoutis, founder and CEO of RIMSYS. As always, thanks, Claudia, for hosting today. And so today I'll be reviewing some of the regulation changes stateside within the US regarding FDA, CDR, CDRH, and the like. My background's all been quality and regulatory for the last 18 plus years. From RIMSYS' side, we are a regulatory information management software solution, specifically helping medtech manufacturers manage global regulations and product registrations. And so from a phase-out period for laboratory developed tests. So that's one of the first ones that we're going to be reviewing today. And so FDA for 2024, the final rule declares that the LDTs are IVDs with a 4-year phase-out policy. And so historically, LDTs are in vitro diagnostics that are intended for clinical use, but there's been a switch in FDA's thinking in terms of how these will be regulated moving forward, because there is a growing number of healthcare decisions being made with LDTs, and so to comply or adhere to the same safety and efficacy concerns that FDA does have, these LDTs will now be fully transitioned to and regulated as IVDs. And so this is going into effect May 6th, 2025. So this is a policy that really contains 5 stages. These stages are dependent on the different requirements of the LDTs. And that first phase does go into effect on May 6th. And the final stage, stage 5, begins May 6th, 2028. And that is 4 years after the publication date of the final LDT rule. And so moving on to manufacturers for the medical device requirements, corrections and removal reporting, quality system requirements for complaint files. So really at the end of the day, this is in an area that people should already be complying with in terms of adverse events, in terms of corrections and removals and reporting and things of that nature. So just making sure that there's additional criteria or additional information available to the FDA to ensure that you're presenting that information correctly to them. And so they're providing additional guidances on some of those enforcement discretions in regards to LDTs and how that's going to be handled. Next slide, please. So the new de novo submission expectation. So as of October 1st, 2025, FDA will make electronic de novo submissions mandatory. And so that transition period started in 2024. And so those de novo submissions, as you are probably already aware, can be voluntary submitted with eStar. So eStar is the new electronic submission tool. It's a PDF, and it's the ability to have a structured way to submit information to the FDA. So they already allow eStars or mandatory reporting for 510Ks for the eStar. And now they will be opening that back up, or opening that up to the de novo electronic submissions here in next year, sorry. And so that is something that if you are not familiar with that process, it is something that will take a little bit of time for you to get familiar with. And so if you do not have familiarity with it, or your drug or your devices are specifically de novo, or it's the first time you're submitting, please get some additional time, or make some additional time before you submit, to ensure that you meet your required or internal timeline to do that. All right, next slide. Thank you. So medical device final guidance for cybersecurity. So this one's interesting. There's certainly a lot of talk with cybersecurity. As far as the final guidance, the draft guidance, not particularly anything that's changed, but it is interesting because it's now quote unquote enforceable from a guidance standpoint, as enforceable as those are. There are, as medical devices become more connected to the internet, and cybersecurity continues to be a threat. FDA is particularly aware of this, and a lot of the nuances around how hackers, or how this information can be used to impact safety or impact healthcare decisions for the global market. And so certainly, confidentiality is a big issue. Patient confidentiality from the data is a big issue. Should a cybersecurity risk be flagged in there? Certainly a lot of integrity, poor configuration, corruption of data, even the ability to control that device is a big issue, certainly when it comes to patient safety or healthcare provider diagnoses and things of that nature. And so making sure that information and the integrity and confidentiality of that information is flawless. And so this is just a really good guidance that has been in draft for a bit, and it's good to see this one come in against cybersecurity threats. And so there was also one other particular item I wanted to talk about for cybersecurity. So there was actually a final guidance in December of 2024 for marketing submission recommendations for predetermined change control plan. I'm sorry, this is the next one. I'm sorry. Okay, next one. Yes, this one. Before I get on to new AI guidance. There's actually one that just came out, final guidance for marketing submission recommendations for predetermined change control plans for AI-enabled device software functions. That's a mouthful, but basically, software as a medical device, change control for AI, and that one was something that just had a final release just this month. That was actually of December 3rd, 2024. So that is a new one. Sorry. And then on top of that, there's been a lot of interest with AI, with the FDA, and how that plays a role in the medical device community as a whole, and some of the nuances around that. And so FDA is planning to provide additional guidance on use of AI and ML in drug development and devices. And so there has already been or it plans to issue a draft guidance. I'm not sure when. It did say 2024, and I'm not sure if it actually has or not. If it did, it had just released. But there are considerations for use in AI to support regulatory decision making for drug and biological products. That is a specific guidance that FDA is looking to issue. On top of that, there has also been some clarity around the research and development to promote transparency and patient safety. And so ensuring that industry is aware that as part of that AI machine learning in the research and development R&D activities, that patient safety is top of mind, and ensuring that when AI machine learning is a very new topic, and so I think FDA is and will continue to issue and update these draft guidances and final guidances over the next few years fairly frequently as new information is evolving, especially when it comes to R&D work, either in medical device, biologics, or drug. And so making sure that they provide further clarification and questions and concerns from industry feels like they're doing the right thing, and it's a great thing that they're being very proactive with it, because it needs to be, because of all the changes. So I would say, even though 2024 there were a few items that were released, I would say if you are in that realm for AI, machine learning enabled devices, or anything in that regard, to stay abreast quite frequently, as things are going to be changing in 2025 and beyond quite frequently. All right.
James, can I interrupt you with a question from the audience really quickly,
Sure.
please? So just going back a couple of slides when you were discussing the updates to the de novo and the rollout of eStar, we've got a question which asks, can you submit a letter to file to the FDA via eStar?
A letter to file. I'm not actually so letter to file for Class 3 devices, or are you for any type of device?
It doesn't specify, so if we go for any type of device, I guess.
I don't actually know that one off of hand, but I can get back to the team and get back that answer to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it depends on if it's specifically for de novo. So usually that's typically just the initial application. And so if there's ongoing support needed for the application itself, letter to file is so depending on if it's a required submission or not, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, no worries. We'll move on then. Thank you.
Sorry, that stumped me a bit. So Unimed, one of my favorite topics. Unimed is coming. Industry is probably going to have their oh crap moment in early 2024, about the Q2 of 2024. So with all the delays to the EU MDR and IVDR, as well as the development and technical hurdles needed for Unimed, there has been some delays with the Unimed rollout, and industry has been pretty hands off at this point and saying, tell me when you're going to release Unimed, and we'll start our process and prioritize our resources to make that happen whenever we are convinced that Unimed is actually going to happen. It is now going to happen, mandatory reporting starting January 2026. So 12 months is the mandatory reporting requirements for certificate and UDI in Unimed, into Unimed. And there will be a 6-month transition period to transmit that information on a mandatory reporting standpoint from January 2026 through June of 2026. And so if you have not already gathered your information, worked on your products, or the like, or worked with different solution providers to submit your data into Unimed in the structured way, if you have a lot, you should start and prioritize that. I know budget season is still a little bit in full force, so if you have the opportunity, make sure that you budget accordingly. Regulatory and operations in IT budget accordingly for those Unimed requirements. And so the machine-to-machine transmission aspect of things does go live January 2026. And so if you're using, if you already have products in the US, you can use the GUDID as a baseline for establishing a plan to the UDI transmission to Unimed, but please make sure that there are a lot more attributes associated with Unimed. You can't just simply download your GUDID UDI information and upload them into Unimed. There's a lot of transformation rules and things of that nature. And that's actually one thing that RIMSYS does do, is we want to have data governance around UDI, not just for the EU, but globally for all markets, as well as machine-to-machine transmission capabilities. We're also part of the MedTech Europe working group, and as part of that group, it is they're kind of in the same boat where there's been enough technical developments and development and configuration completed, and the audit is well underway to be completed of the Unimed database, that there is and should not be any further delay with the implementation of Unimed. And so certainly something that can help is if you are not familiar with UDI requirements, it does get very complex very quickly. And so please start early.
Thank you very much, James, for that really informative rundown of development stateside. Just as a quick heads up to everyone, James has to leave slightly early, just after the top of the hour. So if you do have any more specific questions for James, please get those in so we can pass them along sooner rather than later for you. So we've got just over half an hour now, so we're moving on to our final presentation section before our Q&A section begins. So I'd like to hand you over now to Samartha to cover our third and final presentation today, which will look at trends, mistakes, and key developments to watch in 2025. So take it away, please, Samartha.
Thank you, Alex. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. So Martin and James, always great insights. Now let's dive into a topic that's got everyone talking: the trends, mistakes, and key developments we need to keep our eyes on. Drug shortages remain a persistent challenge. They disrupt patient care and strain pharmaceutical supply chains. Regulators around the globe are stepping up, working proactively to close gaps and prevent future disruptions. Around 40 to 50 new shortages every year, like clockwork. As we can see in the graph here, it's a serious issue, no doubt, but it's also sparking critical improvements. The industry is coming together, innovating and building stronger, more resilient systems. Because in healthcare, making sure patients get what they need isn't just a goal, it's a must. If we move on to the next slide, you will see the number of drugs currently suffering a shortage in the United States: 111. So let's put this challenge into a perspective. Currently, there are 111 drugs facing shortages in the United States alone. This number highlights the urgency of the issue. It's not just statistics, it's directly impacting the patient care, treatment availability, and also overall healthcare stability. Addressing these shortages is a top priority for both regulators and the industry as a whole, as we work toward long term solutions to ensure patients aren't left waiting. And in the next slide, we can see that there are average time to resolve each shortage is 5 months. That's 5 months of strain on healthcare providers and potential risks for patients. That highlights the urgent need for faster, proactive solutions to ensure uninterrupted care. And you can see on the next following slide where the recent regulatory nail biting about supply chain risk isn't restricted to the United States. A new European shortages monitoring platform, that is the ESPM, will go live in February 2025. In 2023, the EU proposed its new human medicines regulation. It suggests that future marketing authorization, that is MA holders, should build and maintain a shortage prevention plan for any product they place on the European market. So as 2025 approaches, this is definitely something to watch closely. And the next, where if we move on to the next slide, where are pharmaceutical businesses going wrong with their pharmaceutical quality system activities as we head into 2025? So you can see there is a graph also I have put together. So a key takeaway from the FDA at the recent PDA FDA joint regulatory conference in September this year was a laser focus on manufacturing quality is causing other adjacent quality issues to go unnoticed and unresolved. This data, it illustrates the point that environmental monitoring leads the list of CGMP citations with 16, followed by laboratory controls and stability at 10. So process validation and regulatory compliance are also show significant gaps. So the message is clear. While manufacturing quality is critical, businesses must take a broader view to address these overlooked areas and strengthen their quality systems. And if we can move on to the next slide, we see that we look toward 2025. These are the most common CGMP mistakes that pharmaceutical businesses need to avoid. Issues like inadequate microbial count, poor aseptic processes, and lack of environmental monitoring procedures remain prominent gaps. On top of that, challenges such as inadequate cleaning validation, quality control, stability testing continue to impact compliance. These gaps highlight the need for businesses to prioritize robust systems, maintain proactive oversight, and also they ensure their quality processes are strong, reliable, and consistently effective. Avoiding these mistakes will be critical to staying compliant and safeguarding product quality moving forward. And if you see in the next in the next slide. Thank you, Alex. Another key driver to look at this year, that is the data integrity, and how we still have a long way to go as an industry. The single biggest recurring compliance issue across CGMP companies for the last 5 years is data integrity. Data integrity has featured on average in about 20% of FDA warning letters every year since 2019. Data integrity isn't just a checkbox, it's the foundation for all the complex quality work. If this foundation isn't solid, everything else is at risk. And that's why I have put in the next slide, where I'm talking about the risk. So along this, inspectors are focusing more and more on data. Audit and inspection formats are changing as follows. Like, for example, regulators are starting to pay ever more attention on how businesses in this sector are looking after data, and that is reflected in new auditing and inspection methodologies. You can also see how today we see a shift toward risk and data-based inspections. So that's how the focus has been changed, and then we need to be prepped against the specific requirements which are in all the processes which are risk-based approach. So we will move on to the next slide based on this data. On final trend to be aware of is the increasing shift towards hybrid inspections, particularly in the US, the shift to the remote regulatory assessments, the information requests that took place in the pandemic days of 2020 to 2021. Doesn't seem to be going anywhere as we head into 2024. In fact, where physical inspections drove 100% of warning letter triggers before the pandemic in 2019, where sample requests were heavily relied on to the trigger warnings. Mid-pandemic, a clear preference for remote information requests can now be seen as the COVID years recede behind us. Remote requests or failure to respond to them accounted for almost a quarter of warning letters issued in fiscal year 2024, while samples have written to a minimal impact. The FDA, in short, is relying more and more remote inspections and record requests to keep tabs on drug and device makers. The implication is that remotely accessible, cloud-based, and digitalized pharmaceutical quality system documentation is now expected by default. Organization has still rely on mountains of paper records, will have to be physically inspected, will therefore miss out on the faster, less burdensome hybrid approach which the FDA is starting to favor. A key thing to consider for 2025 is therefore how remote ready your organization is, and is data is readily available or not. So if we move on to the next slide, we can see that the ICMRA, the International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities, ICMRA initiatives. So this is more into the goal of ICMRA's is the Pharmaceutical Quality Knowledge Management System, the PQKMS, aims to improve industry quality management and ensure reliable supply of critical medicines for patients. Launched in 2020, the initiative focuses on strengthening international collaboration and building processes and infrastructure to support the global pharmaceutical life cycle from development to supply. Launched in 2020, it's focused on building bridges, not walls, between regulators and worldwide. We can see that. So by strengthening international collaboration and creating a shared foundation for processes infrastructure, PQKMS supports the entire global pharmaceutical life cycle from development to supply. The key benefits are regulatory reliance, agility and efficiency. Think of it as regulatory fast tracking with global teamwork. Harmonization, no more lost in translation moments for data transmission, expectations, or inspections. And In fact, it's acceleration, so faster availability of quality medicines across the globe. So here you can see the collaboration pilots. FDA and EMA have collaborated on assessing new manufacturing and QC sites for critical oncology, biologics, safeguarding supply, multi-agency hybrid inspections, that is FDA, EMA, MHRA, Health Canada, are piloting convergence in inspections and assessments to streamline regulatory decisions. These initiatives demonstrate a shift toward greater regulatory convergence and agility, ensuring patients get access to safe, high-quality medicines more efficiently. So if we move on to the next slide, there's a recent ASCA guidance has been released. So FDA's accreditation scheme for conformity assessment, that is ASCA, is a game changer for medical device manufacturers looking to streamline regulatory approval. ASCA allows manufacturers to use test results from accredited labs to demonstrate conformity to FDA recognized standards. Here is why it matters. Increased confidence. So you'll have the test results are FDA standard approved, cutting down the need for retesting, streamlined submissions. The FDA accepts ASCA results directly, speeding up reviews. Consistency and predictability. Standardized testing makes the regulatory journey smoother. Regulatory efficiency, less back and forth, and fewer delays mean quicker paths to approval. In short, ASCA is like a fast lane for regulatory submissions, reliable, efficient, and designed to save both time and resources while ensuring quality and confidence for all the stakeholders. In 2025, if we move on to the next slide, is probably the year where we start to see a real and sustained contribution of AI into the industry. A recent CDER paper explored potential ways that AI can and will impact drug manufacturing in the near future. Qualio is contributing to the shift by strengthening customers' document and training management processes using AI. So you can see into the next slide, when we move on, the trend monitoring. So AI quality, so potential 2025 applications. So this is where the Qualio is contributing to this shift by strengthening customers' documenting as well as training management processes using AI. And if we move on to the next slide, things to consider in all the specific details that I have shared till now. So, but as we've seen that the data integrity would be the most, integrity and maintaining Alcoa Plus with AI, businesses can ensure data remains attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate more consistently than ever. Increased data generation and management. So AI enables smarter handling of growing data volumes, helping teams manage, analyze, derive meaningful insights effortlessly. Regulatory oversight. So AI tools, when aligned with regulatory expectations, provide transparency, confidence during audits and reviews. Similarly, if there is any validations need to be done on the specific standards, that's how AI processes deliver reliable, consistent outcomes that improve accuracy and compliance. However, AI learning and validation. So continuous learning is also needed to ensure AI systems evolve to improve efficiency, but in the same way, there is a check on how this efficiency is being done. Similarly, detect trends and enhance performance over the time. The bottom line is AI is not just the future, but it's now. So integrated into the quality systems, it empowers organizations to work smarter, accelerate processes, and stay compliant, making quality management more proactive, reliable, as well as intelligent. But in the same way, you need to always keep validating it. So I'll hand over to, thank you for listening to me. I'll hand over to Alex for the Q&A session. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks so much, Samantha. So that caps off our third and final presentation for today. Hope you guys are all enjoying it. We've got about just over 15 minutes now to pitch any questions that you might have to our expert speakers while you have them. Martin, I'd like to start with you, please, if you wouldn't mind coming on stage. We've had an interesting question come in a little while ago, which is more geared towards UK and EU. So the question was, with some major changes coming to the FDA with the new government from 2025, with some news coverage on controversial or non-scientific rationale decisions, I think might be a reference to RFK Jr. perhaps. Should the UK and EU proceed with the reliance concept for approvals from what's been happening in the US, perhaps?
Yeah, I would say no change. I mean, it takes quite a long while to get something into law. And so you're going to have to change the law or give some kind of emergency procedure to say we're not going to do that anymore. So I really don't think that for all the noise we're going to see much of a change in the regulation. So what could occur in the US is that there could be local issues. So it could affect the sales of products, of particular products, or distribution of particular products, or whether particular products are reimbursed, which affects the bottom line for some companies, but it doesn't impact your regulatory submission or how you go through an approval of a product.
Okay, great answer. Thank you. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper, Martin, around the changes that you mentioned to the EU MDR and use a really interesting turn of phrase, which is that it's not fit for purpose right now. I remember at Qualio, we did a global survey of life science professionals a couple of years ago when the MDR was first being rolled out, and somebody had very strong views on the EU MDR. They said it was, I still remember what they said. They said it's a monstrous piece of legislation, anti-business, anti-innovation. They were very hard on it. What exactly is it about the EU MDR that needs to change, do you think? And when can we expect those changes to actually be made? As you say, these things can take time, can't they?
I think, okay, so in short, I think the changes that need to be made are not necessarily to the regulation, but to the processes around it, in streamlining the processes. But is the regulation a bad regulation? No, it isn't. I come from a generation where we didn't have a regulation in place that told you exactly what you had to do and what you had to do to get it in the market. I cannot see how an instruction that says this is what you have to do to get a product in the market is inhibiting innovation. I am not a supporter of that approach. I listened to the EU session, the European Parliament session, where they agreed on this resolution to debate it. And my feeling was there's a lot of misinformed people, or the lobby is working very well. Well, the reality of it is that we had 20 years, more than 20 years without a change in regulation. And when you have that, you have a generation of people working in regulatory who no longer actually have to read the regulation and interpret the regulation. They just adopt whatever the company has been doing when they move from one company to another. So the introduction of MDR and IVDR was because some companies were abusing the system to bring unsafe products and materials onto the market. But the positive thing of all of this is it's been a catch-up exercise to educate the regulatory population to read and understand regulations and understand that regulations should be updated and changed on a regular basis. and not wait 20 years for a change in regulation.
Yeah, makes sense. That's a great answer. Thank you, Martin, for shedding a little bit more light on that. Got a question. I know, James, you need to leave a little bit early, so perhaps if I pitch this over to you now, if you want to quickly answer this one. We've got a question about validation of AI systems, and I know this is a topic that you touched on as well as Samartha. How do we validate a system that's constantly conducting machine learning? Surely it's constantly changing, which can pose a problem.
Hire a very expensive consultant to help. That's a very tough question to ask or answer without understanding the specific nuances of the validation, how it's failing, how you're what type of code you're using, what type of models you're using. There's a whole bunch that can be unpacked with that. I'm not the most familiar with validating AI systems for medical devices, but if anybody on the panel can answer better than I can, feel free to. But I think that's something that you might have to outsource somebody for specifically for your use case.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I understand AI is still very much a topic in flux right now, and I think it's obviously one of the main points you made, isn't it, about the FDA needing to clarify things like that for validation of AI and ML and so on. So something to watch in 2025 for sure. Next question is for you, Samartha. I know you talked about data integrity there and how it's featured in about 1/5 of warning letters for the last 5 years. Why do you think so many companies are struggling with their data integrity, and what are some actionable steps that they can take to strengthen their data integrity, do you think?
Thank you, Alex. I believe you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, many companies struggle with data integrity because it requires a cultural shift alongside robust systems, processes, and as well as challenges often stem from outdated systems, lack of automation, and insufficient training. So to maximize data integrity, one can focus on 3 key areas. One is implementing validated systems, fostering culture of accountability, and ensuring continuous training. It's about embedding data integrity principles into daily operations, not just relying on periodic audits or reactive measures. I hope this helps, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And a follow-up question for you, Samartha, as well. You touched on those common CGMP challenges or compliance gaps, things like environmental monitoring and lab controls and so on. How do companies start addressing those problems? Is it just a case of better SOPs, more training? What's the root cause of these compliance gaps, do you think?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So environmental monitoring, or if you take lab controls, are critical for CGMP compliance. But the solution goes beyond just better having SOPs and training, but it's about taking a holistic approach. First, robust systems like automated tools and real-time alerts can help catch issues early. Then technology integration allows us to track trends, pinpoint root causes, as well as continuously improve. So we also need a clear accountability. Everyone should know their roles and responsibilities to avoid any confusion, and it's about collaboration as well. So, for example, quality, manufacturing, lab teams need to work together to resolve challenges effectively. Finally, regular reviews and audits keep everything aligned with regulatory expectations as well as drive ongoing improvements. By combining the right people, processes, and technology, we can stay ahead, identify problems early, and ensure compliance without unnecessary stress.
Great answer. Thanks, Samartha. I think we have answered all the questions which have come up live, so I'll give the audience another 30 seconds or so to frantically type something into the box if you've got a burning question. Otherwise, we can move on to the final few slides and and start to end today's session. So if anyone's got any last questions, please submit them now. And while we're going through that, I will really quickly give a quick pitch to something which we're running at Qualio, which we would love your help with. Now that we've answered your questions, we would like to hear from you guys. Every year, the Qualio team runs a global survey of life science quality professionals, just like you, to take the temperature of the industry. The findings go into our trends report, which is published annually, which you can find on the Qualio website right now if you're interested. And we're just gearing up for our 2025 survey. We're getting ready to roll that out, and we'd love to kick things off with our audience today. So we want to know, what are you struggling with from a quality perspective? What are your plans for 2025? What tools and resources are you using, or you wish you could use perhaps? The survey takes about 7 minutes to complete, and we'd love for you to make your voice heard and to contribute to it this year. So you can follow the QR code there if you want to complete it on your mobile, or just follow the URL on your screen there. And Jan's made it pop up along the bottom there, a very fancy ticker. So thank you for that, Jan. So with all that being said, thank you very much to everybody in the audience and to our 3 expert speakers as well. That was a lot of ground to cover in about 70 minutes. We've obviously covered a couple of continents there and some pretty meaty topics. So if you do have any other questions outstanding from the session, feel free to reach out to us when we send you a follow-up email with the recording and the slide deck from today. So we'll leave it there. Jan, would you like to say any final words to our audience before we close off for today?
Yes, thank you, Alex. So this is our last webinar for this year, and I want to thank all the attendees and Qualio for running all those amazing events with us this year. Thank you very much to the incredible speakers, James, Martin, Samantha. It was a pleasure to hearing your updates for upcoming years. And on this note, I wish you all happy holidays, and we'll see each other in the next year. Thank you.